So I want to start off by saying I am not toxic. And why would you accuse me of being toxic with your book, Kimberly?
Oh, we are all dysfunctional at some point. And the way I like to say it is we are all the fun and dysfunction at some point in time. And it's okay to say that. Like, and if you can't say that, then we actually know what your dysfunction is. Because everybody does it. Like, are you perfect every day?
Dan thinks so. We had a very deep conversation, and Dan thinks he's perfect every day. Yes.
So we know what his blind spot is.
Very apparent. Yeah, would that be narcissism? That'd be narcissism, right? Or would that be sociopath? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
A little bit of all of it. But I mean, like, that's the joke I make is for anybody who says, oh no, I am always right. I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, we clearly know what your blind spot is because everyone screws up at some point in time. And that's what the point of it is. The biggest issue for me is I feel like, particularly coming out of corporate, is it's gotten harder to be able to say I've screwed up. And so I just really wanted to have a conversation as a leader who was happy to raise my hand and say I've screwed up on more occasions than I care to count, but I'm happy to talk about it if it makes it more comfortable for other people to say, oh.
So what are you saying apologizing for your mistakes is okay?
Not only is it okay, I think it's imperative in our work environment now. If you're not able to own up to your own stuff, how do you expect your team members to own up to their stuff? It's the whole lead by example. If you are going to completely get really defensive and say, nope, I am perfect, your team is going to do the exact same thing. So it ends up kind of becoming this, I hate to say it, toxic spiral where nothing works. So yeah, exactly.
So I want to. So your book is fantastic. I enjoyed reading it quite a bit. And the next question I see here says, "What kinds of mirrors are out there that you can help us be more reflective?" And I really think your book is one of those mirrors. I really appreciated the layout. I like the questions that you kind of dug into, and how you sort of approached it. It's a fun read. It's an easy read, and it's one that is sort of like I said, a nice mirror. How did you come up with the idea of writing a book like this?
So it's so funny because, and I actually have it in the book, but I was having cocktails with a friend of mine, and we were having just a straight up bitch fest, and we were talking about leaders. Other leaders, not ourselves, about like how we like them as people, but we just wouldn't want to work
for them. I hear that a lot.
For various reasons.
That is a common conversation. I've heard it multiple times.
Well, and so, I mean, maybe a glass of wine or so later, I had this like lightning bolt moment, and I thought, God, I wonder how many of my former employees would see my face or having this conversation, but it's about me. And that's kind of where it started, was like, oh. And of course, immediately I could think of at least one or two people who don't like, who I've worked with. I know how they felt about me. It was never hidden. And I thought, well, clearly we've got a few to start with. And so what ended up happening is I started having more conversations with people and asking the same question, like, have you ever had a toxic leader, like somebody who you just really hated? And of course, people would say, how much time do you have? I think we need cocktails. And they would tell stories upon stories. And then when I would ask that second question of, well, how many people see your face, do you think, if I asked them that question? And then it was like the weird moment of like, ooh, well, a few. And so the thought about that became is there some validity to it? Like, is there some reason why that didn't work? Is there a reason why they see my face? Did I do stuff that maybe contributed to why they didn't have a great experience with me as a leader? And that's really where it started, was it's so easy to point the finger at somebody else and say they are the problem, when the reality is it's probably a two-way street. And so until you actually...
I just point at my employees.
And what is your turnover like?
You stick around. I got them locked in.
You must pay them very, very well. But that became the thing, was like, if I wanted to be the leader I aspired to be, do I need to ask myself some questions first before I just say, no, they just, it's all them. And so it just kind of went down that path of part of like, how do I get better as a leader and what do I want to do differently?
I think, I mean, a great response there. And I find that we're having a lot of conversations around this space in one form or another. And, there's this one dividing line that Dan and I have found some research on around what's called we're living in what's called a post-industrial. Is that what it's called? Post-industrial post-industrial organizations. That we're in that phase. We're in this post-industrial, and it's deemed one of its big components is self-reflection. It's like looking back, and I'm wondering if
sense making, self-reflection as part of the sense making process,
right? And I'm wondering if bosses always knew that they were part of the problem, but at one point in time it just didn't matter. It's like, I'm the boss.
Oh yeah. Oh, and so I think there's also a generational thing too, because you look at some older generations, there was no need to be touchy-feely. You got paid you got paid money to come in and do a job. And there was no engagement strategies. There was no there's no warm and fuzzies. It was like, show up, do what you got to do. But I think where we're moving societally, our workers now expect something very different.
For sure.
And they are not interested in being told where they are deficient without there being some ownership on the leader's part of like, what are you bringing to the table? And how are you helping me get better? How are you helping me do my job? It's not a one-way street anymore. So if leaders don't start to make the adjustment and say, okay, this is ratcheting up. Let me step back for a second and think, okay, hold on, pump the brakes. What are you doing? Like, what are you feeling right now? And how is that showing up? And what does that look like to your team member? I think it's going to become harder to be a successful leader because people will just leave. I mean, the data is there. During the Great Resignation, that was like the number one indicator why people left their roles. It wasn't salary. It was toxicity in the workplace. It was tolerating.
People quit they don't quit their jobs. They quit their bosses, right?
Well, or they quit the culture. You can quit the culture too, because, I have seen leaders who are trying to do the right things, but the culture of the larger team or the larger organization isn't supportive of like what's actually trying to happen. So I think it's that kind of thing. I think workers are expecting more than what they have expected in the past. And I think that's where a lot of the idea of how do you, what are you, as I say, what BS or bullshit are you bringing to the table? You can't just look at your employee and say, do more. You just can't. They're not going to stay around. They're going to peace out on you.